So as I said, Mississippi State is the next game on the schedule. This is another one of the 3 games in which we play a team twice. Obviously, Kentucky, the game we just played that I just discussed, was that first one. This Mississippi State game is the the home game following that matchup in Starkville that happened a few weeks ago at the end of January. I thought that Alabama at times in that first matchup with Mississippi State played pretty well. But there were 2 guys that really Alabama let go off and kind of control the game that obviously will be the huge point of emphasis for this game when State comes to town. And that was Josh Hubbard and Keyshawn Murphy. Hubbard and Murphy really played much more of a 2-man game, and Alabama was giving up shots to Hubbard that you're really trying to force him not to take. He ended up getting off 13 2-point attempts, 15 3-point attempts. He had 28 shot attempts, had 3 assists, right? Like, they really let Hubbard and Murphy kind of play that 2-man game and, pick us apart at moments in this game, right? Now, granted, they were the only 2 guys that scored in double figures, so it really felt like for large stretches of that game that if Murphy and Hubbard had not done that Mississippi State was going to kind of get run out of their own gym. But credit to Jans and credit to Hubbard and them to be able to score that and be able to keep them as close as they were. I think that Alabama obviously will need to put much more of an emphasis on the 2 of those guys if you want to be able to play to the potential that you have and obviously hold Mississippi State to much less scoring, right? A 1.2 points per possession for Mississippi State is not something that should be acceptable for Alabama. Mississippi State is a okay offensive team, but they're not good enough to be a 1.2 against Alabama. I think that we're more than capable to holding them to that, 1.05, similar to what Alabama was able to hold Kentucky to, if not a little better. Just because they don't have, they have some shooters better than they have had in years past with guys like Riley Kugel. Melendez has been hitting some shots. Harris can hit shots. They do have some better shooters than they've had in years past, but this still is not the craziest of all time Mississippi State offense. I know right now, if we look at their KenPom page, they are 25th in offensive efficiency, but a lot of that is, comes from inside the arc because they are 287th in 3-point percentage. The only guy they currently have on their team shooting over 36%, they have 2 guys shooting over 36%, and Josh Hubbard and Claudell Harris, with Riley Kugel shooting at 32%, right? So this is a situation where Alabama, gave up 32% from 3, but gave up 40% from 3 from a guy like Josh Hubbard. And I just don't think that's something that Alabama should be giving up. Obviously, a lot is said about how Alabama has given up some career highs to multiple guys. I think that the team and the defense as a whole is going to, kind of understand that that's something they can't do. This is one of the guys that they gave up those points to in the first game in a way to kind of right the wrong, so to speak. Even though you won that first game, you got embarrassed on the defensive end, quite frankly. And giving up 38 points should never be acceptable. And, I think it's something that the guys are going to take pride in, what they can do to stop him from scoring at that level that he did in the first one. On the Alabama side of the fence, on the other hand, I think this is a game where a guy like Jaron Stevenson did not play super well in the first game. But I think he's coming off of much better performances. I think he gives you a defensive option potentially that you could even put on Hubbard that could potentially cause him some issues just because you have the extra length of a guy like Jaron Stevenson or a guy like Muhammad Diabate. Or even like a guy like Chris Youngblood, a more physical or a longer body on him to potentially cause him some issues. I think Jaron Stevenson should be able to have a pretty good game in this one. Chris Youngblood had an elite game. He goes 7 of 10 from 3 in that first matchup. That was kind of, in my opinion, still probably one of Chris Youngblood's best performances in an Alabama uniform. I think he's more than capable of having that type of performance again in this one. A guy that I would also expect to have a really big bounce back is a guy like Mark Sears. Obviously coming off 2 30-point performances, but the most important part of this, he had 17 points in the first matchup. He didn't play particularly poorly. He even had 9 assists, But the big thing is he had 7 turnovers in that first game. And I'm sure that's something that Nate's going to be emphasizing, Mark's going to be trying to emphasize, and they're going to want to obviously clean up in this game is limiting the turnovers. You only had 14 as a team, but having a guy like Mark have 7 of your 14 is just not something you want to see. Obviously, he handles the ball a good bit. This was a game that LeBaron Fallon, if I remember correctly, was still slightly injured. So obviously, this will be one of the games that he's entering into that starting lineup again. I would expect the same starting lineup with Mark, LeBaron, Chris, Grant, and Cliff. So this is, again, just a situation where I do think that Mark Sears coming off the ball will help him from a turnovers perspective. I think that LeBaron Fallon, obviously, being injured a little bit in the first one, limited his playing time. He only had 17 minutes in that first game. He had 4 rebounds, or sorry, he had 2 rebounds and 2 assists, so he didn't, play poorly or anything, but it is something that obviously him being back fully healthy, I think this will be one that he will relish and will potentially also want to draw the matchup when you're talking about a guy like Josh Hubbard. So I think those are some of the ones that, maybe didn't play as great the first game. But obviously then you got a guy like Mohamed Diabate that grabbed 7 offensive rebounds in that first game, right? He was a huge reason why Alabama was able to win that game in Starkville. And, Nate made a comment in the post-game press conference after Kentucky that, Mo just has to be a little bit more locked in the scouting report so that they can play him more. And that's something that you really hope you see for this one because, like I said, obviously he had such a big impact in that first game that I think this is another one that I would expect him to be able to have a pretty big impact. At times, Jan's squad can play super blue-collar, super hard-nosed. So a guy like Mohamed Diabate, a guy like Chris Youngblood, a guy like Cliff, right, honestly can get a lot of playing time. Even Aiden Sherrill, could get a decent amount of playing time just because of the physicality at times that Mississippi State plays with. I think that all of those guys are guys that I would really expect to have solid games. The other thing that when I'm looking at a guy like Mo D is also he gives us a lot of what Cam Matthews on Mississippi State gives Mississippi State, right? Cam Matthews, another 6'7" guy, a guy that in the first game had 3 steals, 2 blocks, 4 assists, 4 offensive rebounds, right? He is the guy you want to circle not to let make you pay, right? When I talk about scouting report and Alabama missing in the scouting report, I talk about a game like Missouri, right? The things when you look at Missouri is you had to limit Grill's ability to take the 3-point shot and some of the other shooters, and then you had to be strong with the ball like around Robinson. And we just weren't, right? Robinson was able to get some steals. Cam Matthews is that guy you have to circle when you're talking about Mississippi State from a defensive perspective, right? Obviously on offense, it's going to be Josh Hubbard and Keyshawn Murphy. But from a defensive perspective, Cam Matthews is the guy you circle, and it's because he does everything for Mississippi State, right? He often leads them in offensive rebounds. He's going to lead them in blocks. He's going to lead them in steals, right? He is a guy that just flies around the court from a defensive perspective, and again, does similar to what we see out of Mohamed Diabate. So being able to limit his impact as much as possible on that defensive end. Obviously, this game is going to be in Coleman, so not quite as worried that if he makes a big play, it's going to get the crowd into it. Obviously, being a home game, that was what I was more concerned about in that first game. But he's still somebody that can even deflate the crowd, right? A block or a steal can take the crowd out of the game when you're talking about a home environment. So he's somebody that you kind of have to circle on the scouting report and circle anytime he's out there because he can make plays all over the floor. There's only 2 guys that played over 30 minutes in the first game, and it was Josh Hubbard that scored 38. And Cam Matthews that makes all of those plays, right? So he is a huge reason why they are the type of team that they are. He's a huge part of what they do, and you just have to circle Cam Matthews when you're playing Mississippi State, right? I do think that Alabama should be able to win this game. I think that Mississippi State is going to be looking to bounce back. They did drop a game on the road at Oklahoma the last time out, which is odd because they beat Georgia on the road, lost to Florida at home. No real shame in that. They beat Ole Miss on the road, beat Texas A&M at home, and then they lose in Oklahoma. So they're going to be trying to stop potentially stop a 2-game skid and see if they can try to close out the season strong. I do think that Alabama is, been able to lock into the scouting report a little better when you talk about that Kentucky game. I think that Kentucky game proves to our team that, hey, this is what you can be capable of when you lock into the scouting report, when you play as a team, when you're a little bit less concerned about doing everything yourself, right? Nate talked about Mark relying on LeBaron to be able to get him the ball, or rely on Aiden to be able to get him the ball. Or even when you're talking about a guy like Cliff or Jaron or any of our team, right? Being able to rely on your teammates to do what they need to do and to be locked in on their part so that you can do your part, right? I think that the team is starting to come together a little better from that standpoint. I saw a lot that I really like to see. Honestly, at the end of that Missouri game, the fight was good. But then in that Kentucky game, the lack of panic when you even went down early, they just kind of stuck to the game plan, understood, hey, it happens. They hit some shots, locked in for the end of the second half. You give up 20 points in the beginning of the first 5 minutes, then you give up 20 points the rest of the 15 minutes in that first half, right? This is something that I think Alabama will not let, even if Hubbard hits some tough shots, because I expect he will, right? Hubbard is that type of guy that he can hit tough shots. But even if Josh Hubbard hits a couple of tough shots, I don't think Alabama's going to let it rattle them. And because of that, I think Alabama wins this game. And honestly, I think Alabama kind of wins this game going away. I know in the first game, this was one of the lower possession games that Alabama had. Mississippi State was able to hold it to like 70 possessions. I think a lot of that, honestly, was due to the fact that Alabama had a lot of turnovers. Those 14 turnovers and stuff was a problem. And it was a situation where, Josh Hubbard was milking the clock and then was hitting something big toward the end. I think Alabama's probably going to have this game closer to like 71, 72 possessions. If I was guessing, so maybe just a couple of more possessions in this one is what I would expect. My thought is this is going to be a slightly lower scoring game just because of that possession number. I think Alabama should be able to take advantage of some certain moments in this game. Mississippi State does give up a lot of three-point attempts. We saw that in the first game, right, with how Chris Youngblood was able to get off 10 attempts. I think this is a game where Alabama potentially gets a get-right game because they have not shot it super well from three in Coleman, but I think this is one where they potentially do shoot well. And so I'm going to project that Alabama wins this one by a score of, let's go 80. Let's go like 88-75. 88. No, let's go 88-74. Let's go 88-74. Like I said, I do think this is a game in which, would it completely shock me if Mississippi State was able to keep this game closer? No. I know they're capable, but this is a game where I think that Alabama, like I said, I think they got partially embarrassed in that first game because of how Josh Herbert was able to score and how, it honestly took, a great effort from a guy like Chris Youngblood for us to win that game. I think that the team, understood that you just can't give up a career night to a team's best player. And I think that they got a little embarrassed with that. And so I think that that's going to be something at the top of mind with this team. And they're going to look to prove like, hey, we're capable of playing defense. We're capable of holding a team much better. And like I said, if you're talking 71, 72 possessions, I think holding the team to, near around 74, 75 is absolutely reasonable for this Alabama team. And I think that that's what they're going to be able to accomplish. So that's what I'm going to say for this game. I think Alabama does win it by, a decent margin. I think that Alabama is able to, take 2 wins into Saturday in Thompson-Boling, a place they have not played super well. But either way, we will have a recap episode that's going to come out on Thursday, recapping this game. So if you are interested, whatever happens, win or lose, I will have an episode recapping this game. It's going to come out on Thursday. Of course, I will be in attendance for this game Tuesday night. Then, like I said, Wednesday I can record and I'll put it up for Thursday morning. So if you are interested in anything else, want me to cover anything in more detail, please put comments down at the bottom. I do read all of those. I do appreciate all of the support. Thank you so much, as always, for the support on the podcast. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already, and I will catch you in the next episode. Peace.